This will be a day long remembered. Now I am the master.
Welcome to another episode of Legends and Theories. And welcome to this fun video series that I wanted to do where I'm looking at how would Batman do in the Spider-Man games and how would Spider-Man do in the Batman games. So with this, we're starting off with how Spider-Man, and by Spider-Man I mean both of them, would do in the Arkham games. I'll be looking at how they will do individually. They will have all equipment that they have available during the games for that specific character. So Miles wanted to get access to all the gadgets that Peter has in Spider-Man, but they will both have access to the ones from Spider-Man 2 since they share the same gadgets. And then also it's going to be for this specific one, they have to follow the plot of the story and go through all the boss fights and everything else in the exact locations that they did happen. The only exceptions I'm going to be making is for things that are just impossible for the characters. For example, since neither Peter or Miles is a detective, they're not going to be able to do the more elaborate crime scene investigations from Origins or Night. And on the other hand, Batman won't be able to do something like climbing the walls of Oscorp to hack into stuff, and they will obviously have to change how they chase different vehicles. So in those exceptions where the characters do have different skill sets, I will allow slight changes to how the story goes. But I'm trying to keep those as close as possible, and they can't, for example, have Spider-Man go and just wipe down the Joker at the start of Arkham Asylum and basically completing the game there. But I will be doing a separate video where I'll look at that and how they can adapt based on the character's personality. But just for this one, for the fun of it, I'm going to take a look at how they would do when they have to strictly follow the story, and for stuff with like the fear toxin and other things, they'll be getting, similar visions, but they'll also be, captured, have Titan poisoning and everything. And I'm going to be generally just looking at them both, since I think if Peter could do it, Miles could do it since he is more powerful. But with certain events, I'm going to take a look at how it would change because Miles' extra abilities will give him a slight advantage in some of these fights. They will get access to some of their allies when it is necessary for it, when those sort of in roles that Batman's allies would come in, or there's those situations I mentioned that are just impossible. Peter also is going to have access to the anti-venom suit, but will not have access to the black suit. That is since he does get rid of it, and I want to look at them at the end of it. So, the anti-venom suit seems pretty similar. It just doesn't make him as powerful. And yeah, there's that little fact I want to mention. And then finally, if in any of these videos I reach a point where it's impossible for the hero to continue, I will continue on with the series, even though they technically would have failed, just to see how they'll do with the rest of it. But yeah, let's now go into Origins. But I'm also not going to be doing Origins Blackgate because I don't really know that well enough. Starting with the Blackgate riots, either Spider-Man would have no real problems fighting through the enemies there and could really easily make it to the roof where they would fight Killer Croc. And both of them have fought people way more powerful They have way stronger hits, and they should be able to easily enough take down Croc. Going to the next part, we take a look at the first Predator section, where they have to save all the hostages taken by Enigma's men. And they should easily be able to go through this. Although they're not as good as stealth, they should be able to easily deal with any hostage situations in this and be able to take down armed henchmen easily enough since they are way more resilient to bullet damage than Batman. So let's go and continue on to what I consider the first kind of problem, but it's more in the fact that I need to work things around a little differently since we get to our first crime scene. And here, when investigating the crime scene, I think you could go one of two ways with it. Either Peter and Miles are able to just find the card and use that to hack into the door using the spider sense to realize they can't just slide it. Or they could use MJ and or Yuri/Wraith to be able to help them solve the crime scene, but for this one I think it's just simple enough for them to find the card and use it. They don't need to really solve the crime scene here and can leave it for the police. They just need to figure out where the card is so they could either use it themselves or have Genki use it to be able to hack into the system, and they can then continue on to Jezebel Plaza, where they'll be able to easily take out Penguin's men. And although they aren't going to be as aggressive as Batman was with Loose Lips, they will still be able to get the information out and begin to track down Penguin for the Fight Club. And then they will be able to pretty easily track down the different radio signals and use it to triangulate Penguin's position. After they go there, they should be able to pretty easily clear out enemies at the final offer, where we sadly reach the point where they lose this challenge because they face the most difficult boss fight in the history of gaming. That's right, it is the Electrocutioner, and sadly, this is impossible for him to beat. Batman barely survived this, and he is a far more skilled fighter, and they're just simply going to die in this situation. There is no way they could beat the Electrocutioner. Of course, I am kidding, and they'd probably take him down even faster than Batman did. Although that is probably impossible since it was like a 2-second fight. So yeah, let's continue on through the final offer, where they'll be able to pretty easily take on Penguin's men, be able to interrogate his enforcers, and eventually make it to Penguin's interrogation of Falcone. They'll be able to rescue him, and although I don't think they will be able to get as much out of him, they still think it could be good enough for them to be sent to Lacey Towers before they are attacked by Deathstroke. And this is where we reach our first actual challenge of this, where they both could fight Deathstroke. And I think that Peter will have a lot harder of a time since Miles does have the advantage of his Venom powers and being able to turn invisible. I don't think the anti-Venom suit is going to do too much against Slade, but I think it's possible for both of them to win, although Deathstroke is a lot more skilled of a fighter than really anyone they've fought, with the possible exception of Craven, who neither of them did too well against. And I think that they can win, but it's going to be a really hard fight for them. Continuing on to Lacey Towers, we reach a point where we're going to go with my second option with crime scenes because there's no way that they're going to be able to solve the murder of Black Mask. So with this, they'll be getting some assistance from MJ and Yuri. And with that, they'll be able to piece together just enough to find the blood samples and realize that they need to look at the National Criminal Database, which I'll have to bring into the GCPD to access. And I think there could be one or two ways to do this. Either have Yuri join them, and she goes to access it herself. But I think that having a kind of escort mission changes the nature of the game. So we'll just have them going in individually for them to be able to go and upload it. And when we take a look at the GCPD section, it's going to be a lot easier for Miles to do this with his ability to turn invisible. Although he will still have to do the most of the Predator encounters and combat encounters. I think it's going to be a lot easier for him, and we'll definitely see that when I look at changes for this game. But looking at both of them, they'd be really easily get through the GCPD, although it will be a little more difficult for Peter. And they'll be able to get to the end where they'll get the advice from Barbara Gordon, who will tell them that they have to go underground to access the database. So we then go to the sewer section where they'll be able to do it about with the same level of competence as Batman. They'll be able to go and defeat who they think is Black Mask's men, and they will also be able to go and get to the bombs and disable them. But then we get to the criminal database, and this is one where I'm not fully sure if they're going to be able to put all the pieces together. It definitely is possible, but I'm not fully sure. Just for the sake of this, let's just say it is possible that after they upload the blood, they're able to figure out that Black Mask is actually the Joker and go to stop the bank robbery. And going to the bank, once they make it there, they'll be able to easily take out Joker's men and make it towards the Cyanus Industries steel mill. And at the steel mill, they can pretty easily once again go through the men and reach Black Mask. And although it is technically a little unrealistic for them to be hit by Copperhead, we'll just say it is possible since Spider-Man was hit by Scorpion in Spider-Man. So if they're poisoned by Copperhead, they'll have to go through the stuff, and just for the sake of this section, we're going to say that Miles can't just turn invisible to avoid Copperhead, and that they'll have someone working on the cure to be sent to them, although both are technically capable of making the cure. We don't know if the materials will be there, and when fighting Copperhead, I think they definitely will be able to hold off long enough for the antidote to be delivered to them, and either Peter or Miles would then be able to easily defeat Copperhead once they have been cured from her poison. And then there's also the fact that we'll just say that also Genki was able to start tracking the Electrocutioner signal. I think it's a pretty good chance since he's probably more technologically advanced than Alfred, although probably not as advanced as Oracle. So he'll be able to go and track down the Electrocutioner to the Gotham Royal Hotel, which will be another section where I don't think it really matters too much. Miles' invisibility really won't do too much to be different, and they'll be able to fight up through the levels until they reach the bombs, where I think they'll be able to hack into them and try to disable them. And I think that we'll just say that they fail once again, where the Joker rigged them to explode no matter what. they'll jump out and go to the next few combat encounters and eventually reach Bane. And I'd say that they'll do the Bane fight relatively the same because Bane is definitely on a powerful end, but they fought people stronger. And I think that, especially if there's a distraction like Gordon showing up, that Bane will be able to escape, and both Spider-Man would be just pushed back just enough to have to go and save Joker from falling to his death instead of going after Bane, and I think that will make it the chase after them later. And now I'm just going to kind of skip over the next small section of the game, which is just more personal development for Joker and Batman. We don't really need to look at that for either Spider-Man, and we can move on to the next major story section of the game where they're trying to track down Bane. And they'll go to investigate the report of who they think could be Bane dead in the GCPD morgue. After realizing that it's not him, they'll be able to use a tracker they place on him to get to Bane's hideout. And they're, with a slight change around, we'll just say that he's figured out the identities of the Spider-Man and they're going back to go in and save it. We'll just say an Alfred equivalent character, since, just to make it a little more emotional for them. So it'll be MJ for Peter or Miles' mom, and they'll be at the Batcave, which we'll just call the Spider Cave for now, and going through the events off to go and take down Firefly, which I think they will be able to do with not too much difficulty, and then they will be able to continue on and get to the, we'll just say, Spider Cave again, where they'll find their loved one nearly dead. And I think that both will be able to bring them back, where CPR is to be the method that Peter uses, while Miles would be able to use his electric shocks to go and do the, heavy work of bringing back his mom. And then we will continue on to the second Blackgate riot, where they will be able to pretty easily get through the criminals and move on to the final challenging section, which will be Bane on TN1, since they'll be able to beat the first round of the Bane boss fight pretty easy. But when they get to TN1 Bane, I think that there is a chance for them to fail. It is small, but I think if someone like Genki or overlooks the fact that TN1 is going to make Bane insanely powerful and is able to one hit Batman and two or three hit either Spider-Man. But I think that they'll be able to take down Bane fast enough that TN1 isn't going to fully take over. And even if it did, their spider sense should be good enough to help them avoid enough hits to take down Bane. So although there is a chance of failure here, I think it's so small that it doesn't really matter. Then they'll make it to the final section where they go and fight against the Joker in the church. It'll be a pretty easy beatdown like it was for Batman, and that reaches the end of Origins. I'm also going to look at Cold Cold Heart in this, and because this is taking a lot longer than I thought, I'm going to be splitting this into different parts, where I'm just going to be looking at Origins in this. But before I look at the Cold Cold Heart DLC, I'm going to take a look at potentially challenging side missions, since they could probably beat most of them, but we'll take a look at the few that might cause challenges and see if they could beat those. And looking at the three that I think really need to be discussed, there is the Mad Hatter, which I don't think they will be disoriented at first. They fought villains like Mysterio who will use illusions, and have had the sections where Peter was poisoned with Scorpion's poison, so I think that they'll be able to get through his hallucinations and rescue Alice. We then have the next one being Shiva, where they will, although fighting a pretty powerful opponent, be able to defeat her, although it will be a little more difficult for them since they're not as skilled fighters as Batman. But I think their powers will give them just enough to be able to defeat her. I don't really think Anarchy is mentioned because I think they could pretty easily disarm those bombs. And then the one that they probably have the most problems with is Deadshot. And it'll cause them the most problems of the side missions, but they'll be able to pretty easily defeat him. Now let's go into the events of Origins Cold Cold Heart. And going into that, we will do the first section of Wayne Manor where they have to be going around stealthily just as their secret identities. They can't do anything to expose it, so it'll serve similar to the sections where Peter's kind of sneaking around the high school in the Spider-Man 2 flashbacks. So yeah, with that, I think that both will be able to pretty easily clear out the criminals from the room, especially if they have access to their web shooters since they always have those on. They just have to be a little smarter and be a little more hidden about it, where Miles has the advantage of being able to turn invisible, so he'll have just a little bit easier time with it and not have his identity exposed. Although it's going to be a little harder for Peter, he is definitely able to do it. When they return in their Spider-Man suits, both of them should have no problem fighting through Penguin's men until they eventually reach the ballroom, and there they should once again have no problem. For the sake of the story, Freeze and Penguin escape, and they have to pursue them into Gotham. And when in Gotham, they'll be able to pretty easily go and follow the clues to get to GothCorp. After getting there, they will be able to go and once again pretty easily get the parts for the cryogenic drill. And then they will face a slight challenge here where they will not have something as protective as the extreme environment suit. But I think that if they really had to get through the frozen gas, they could use the anti-venom suit to get through, but it really wouldn't matter too much because they could climb on the ceiling and use web swinging to get over it, and use their webs to activate any switches so they can go and get into Freeze's lab and other places. And that brings us finally to the Mr. Freeze boss fight. And while this is going to be pretty challenging for them, I think that they will ultimately be able to pull off a win from it. It's not going to be the easiest thing ever. Freeze is still a very dangerous opponent, but they should be able to get to the point where they figure out that Nora is in danger and Ferris Boyle begins to attack her. They'll actually be able to break through the ice even faster than Batman did, defeat Boyle, bring Freeze into custody, and save Nora's life. And yeah, both Spider-Men will be able to beat the events of Arkham Origins. I think that they're not going to have too many problems, but going to this, I will be continuing hopefully next week, but I have no idea what my availability is going to be next week because I haven't got my work schedule yet, and this is a giant video to edit. I'm finishing this on Wednesday, and I'm glad I did because this has taken me at least 2.5 to maybe 3 hours already. And that's just me before I edited this final section, because with this final section, I actually had to re-record because there was some audio issues. So yeah, honestly, I think that they'd also be able to do it. And I want to know what you think. Please let me know in the comments. And I'll see you in the next episode of Legends and Theories. Thank you for watching this episode of Legends and Theories. Please subscribe, like the video, share the video, leave a comment, check out the video on screen, and may the Force be with you.